Hello, this is Debbie Lynn Toomey, Tufts Medical Center's Injury Prevention Coordinator, and you're watching Aging Strong. Aging Strong is sponsored by the Quincy Health Department. And as you all know, if you've been watching, Aging Strong aims to empower and educate older adults with information and resources that's out there in our communities. If not out in the communities, maybe from the guest speakers that I have on the program, you might be able to ask your community leaders to maybe start initiating these programs. And actually today, my guest speaker is Lieutenant Casey Hatchett, and she is a Brookline Police Department CERT coordinator. And you'll learn all about what CERT is during this whole program. So Casey, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Debbie. I've been really looking forward to our conversation today. And hello to Dan Wallace, who's in our audience here, and others who will be tuning in. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about our Brookline Community Emergency Response Team, otherwise known as CERT, and the CERT program more just generally, and how it's implemented in communities and opportunities for volunteerism and resources that are provided. Our program in Brookline has been in existence since 2004, but the CERT program was actually started in the mid-1980s, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So again, I'm Casey Hatchett. I'm with the Brookline Police Department. In Brookline, the Community Emergency Response Team is operated out of the police department. In some communities, it's the fire department. In some, it's the Office of Emergency Management, and others, they're just private individuals that start the program and are liaisons to their municipal partners in running the program. And so in Brookline, it was something that I was interested in starting and coordinating. And so in the fall of 2023, I researched the CERT program and got myself trained. And here we are 20-something years later. So today I'll talk about the history of CERT, what the Brookline CERT looks like, and how you can consider what a CERT program might look like in your own community. I'll talk about the different recruitment and trainings and deployments that we do, and then just talk about it just generally as volunteer opportunities, not only the resources that we provide to the community, but also what it gives to the volunteer to have the opportunity to give back to their community, get involved, and really have those meaningful experiences. So why start a CERT? After 9/11 in Brookline, we brought together the emergency management team, which consists of department heads from throughout our community, and really looked at how prepared we were to deal with the domestic preparedness needs if an event like we saw happen in New York and throughout the country was to happen locally in the Boston area. We realized very quickly we had very little in place to address a terrorist type attack. And then shortly after that, we saw the anthrax scares and then Hurricane Katrina. And so really what started as a look at how we could prepare to respond to a terrorist incident became kind of an all hazards approach, and how we could look at training and equipment and policies and procedures to be able to handle those critical incidents, whether natural or man-made. And very early on, we identified the need for civilian mobilization to help augment emergency response. In Brookline, we have a police department of about 115 officers, fully staffed. We'd be closer to 135, and similar number for our fire department. And so at any given time, maybe a third of those that personnel is working. And so our resources could be tapped very, very quickly. And so we realized during emergencies, we really needed to have folks that we could call upon to come in and assist us. And after what we saw, taking place, through the variety of incidents, tragic incidents that were happening, like 9/11, like Katrina, like the anthrax scares, I think our community was really ready to step up and come out in service to our community. So the CERT program was initially developed by the LA Fire Department in 1985, and it was designed to help citizens who would be, kind of isolated on their own after long periods of time following major disasters like wildfires and mudslides and earthquakes. Things were less likely maybe to see here, although we did just have an earthquake on the eastern seaboard. Wildfires and mudslides are less likely in Brookline, but there are certainly many other types of emergencies that we've identified the need to have additional resources to assist us with. And then in 2003, President Bush asked all Americans to volunteer in service to their country. Again, this is after what we saw on 9/11 and the other tragic incidents that were happening. And there was a considerable amount of interest across the country, and certainly here in Brookline, to stand up in service to our community. So we looked at the Citizen Corps program, we looked at the CERT program and the Medical Reserve Corps. So the Community Emergency Response Team and the Medical Reserve Corps were the two programs that were selected here in Brookline to help us create a safer community, stronger community, better prepared. And that was to address, acts of terrorism, crime, public health concerns, and all different types of disasters. And so in the fall of 2023, I was able to track down a training that was happening up in Lowell for a train the trainer for the CERT program, and I got certified as an instructor. We began recruitment. We had a very robust interest in joining. And so we held our first class in the winter and spring of 2024. And to date, we've now held 20 of those basic training classes. Plus, 2 years ago, we launched a junior CERT program. So we now have about 75 high school students that have gone through a training program. Our adult kind of regular CERT basic training is 10 weeks, and I'll go over the curriculum for that, followed by regular ongoing types of, continuing education. And then our junior CERT program, we have in a 5-week curriculum. Our curriculum has grown and changed based on the feedback from our volunteers and kind of the type of work that we see our volunteers doing as the last 2 decades have evolved. We have about 300 volunteers in Brookline, including our junior certs. And so it's a pretty robust program. And on any given year, I would say at least half of those volunteers actually come out for a variety of activations that we see. So it's a very robust program and a really great group of people who some have been involved for 20 years. So our training program, and I'll just kind of go through this quickly, covers, Are You Ready? Talking about active threats and situational readiness. We cover basic fire safety with our local police fire department. We do an emergency preparedness begins at home and give, volunteers tips and tricks on ways that they can prepare their own lives and their own families in the event of needing to either evacuate or shelter in place. We do an introduction to search techniques because we've activated our CERT teams to help with missing person searches. We do first aid, AED, and Stop the Bleed. The Stop the Bleed is fairly new to our curriculum, just the last 10 years. And that, is an example of what we've seen kind of following the Boston Marathon bombing, where tourniquet use was really critical to be used there and actually after the Gulf War as well. We work with the American Red Cross very closely, and they do a shelter operations and a mass care training for us. We talk about the Health and Homeland Alert Network, which is how we activate our volunteers and send out emergency notifications. We actually even put our volunteers out in the middle of Coolidge Corner and Brookline Village and introduce them to traffic direction. So if you're driving through Brookline, you get really stuck in traffic, that might be one of our training nights. And while we're doing that, we run them through some de-escalation trainings to let them kind of process stressful situations, how they perceive a threat or an escalation in violence and responding to that. And so that's our basic core curriculum that we put our new CERT volunteers through. And then we have ongoing continuing education programs that we do with our Medical Reserve Corps, from our Emergency Preparedness Buddies program, which I think you may be talking about on this program at some point, which is run through the Office of Emergency Management by Sophie Gordon, working with our volunteers to provide services to our senior population and people who are more isolated, to make sure that they're prepared for emergencies, doing check-ins, helping, putting together those emergency preparedness plans, coping with stress during emergencies, healthy eating, working with special populations. We do regional drills and exercises. And then we ask our volunteers to come out for a variety of community events. So it's a great way for them to engage with their community at like our National Night Out, our Brookline Day, our arts festivals, the Boston Marathon. We run 2 reception centers, and we, in the course of Marathon Monday, we'll have about 50 to 60 of our CERT and MRC volunteers come out, and they'll operate 2 reception centers, providing services to runners, spectators, volunteers, and the community. And if there's some type of incident that happens throughout Marathon Monday, our volunteers are trained, equipped, and ready to take in and shelter people that are along the course that might need services. So that's a big deployment for us. You can see some of our long-term volunteers here on the screen. And some of our general activations that we do throughout the year include assisting displaced residents from building fires. We've had building floods that have caused us to have to shelter folks in place and provide services for a number of days, organizing our shelter trailers, running the reception centers at the marathon, flu clinics, COVID clinics, local parades, community events. We at one point had oil spill in in the river that runs through Brookline, and we called out our volunteers to help us wash waterfowl that had been contaminated by the oil. So I always say you never know what we're going to call you for. So some emergencies are a little more traditional, but I don't think we ever dreamed we'd be calling our volunteers to come wash ducks in our police chief's garage. So I think that's probably one of the favorite activations that we've had for our volunteers. We have assisted regionally with shelters during blizzards, following the tornadoes in Western Mass, following the ice storms in Central Mass. We come out during heat emergencies and cold emergencies. We do flood cleanup with the Red Cross, which we've seen on the North Shore and the South Shore. We assist with the local food pantry when they have, increased needs. And during the U.S. Open, which was hosted in Brookline 2 summers ago, we ran a call center that was staffed by our CERT volunteers and MRC volunteers. And then following the Boston Marathon bombing, we ran an emergency shelter site for runners who were stranded in Brookline, and provided, critical care and services to them. And so, we're a very robust program, and, we continue to train and we continue to recruit so that we have a variety of volunteers that can come out for activations that interest them, can come to trainings that interest them. And we recognize in a program that has such longevity as this one, 20 years, that there are seasons in everyone's lives. And at some points, we've had volunteers that are very, very active and engaged. And then, maybe they have, a medical situation or an aging family member they're taking care of, or they get a job that is very demanding. And so they kind of flow in and out of their volunteerism. And so it's really important for us to kind of continue that process of recruitment and training and keeping people engaged. And so, activating for emergencies, there may be many months that go by between emergencies, and we don't want our volunteers to lose that connectivity with one another and that feeling of engagement with the program and the community. And so we do utilize them, for a wide variety of events, like our community events and, our flu clinics and other things that are more well planned. And bringing these volunteers in during these types of activations really allow us to free up our emergency responders to deal with whatever emergency, or incident is unfolding, and have these volunteers who are local, who know the community, who know oftentimes the residents that, they may be assisting, to come in and really take care of that aspect of it. And so it's really an incredible group of volunteers. Our 300 volunteers, as I said, we have about 75 now who are youth, that have been trained while they were in high school. And our average volunteer is probably in their 60s. And we have some that are much older, some that are much younger, and we have volunteers of all abilities. And so in emergency preparedness, emergency response, say there's a role for everyone. And so if maybe doing a missing person search in the dark is not, ideal for you because you don't see well at night, or you maybe aren't, sure of your footing when walking at night, we need people to help, check in our volunteers, to help distribute information, to monitor social media. There's many, logistics are a huge part of any operation. And so, when you think about a flu clinic, we'll have medical professionals that are actually giving the vaccinations. But for every one clinician, we probably have 5 or 6 non-medical folks that are helping with the logistics and kind of keeping things moving, whether that's, the flow of people through the clinic, or checking people in, monitoring people after they receive their vaccination. And so in any type of activation that we have, we make sure that there's a role for everyone. And, the training that we do, the 10-week training, allows us to really get to know our volunteers. It lets them get to know us. And so there's that level of comfort, and we're familiar with one another, so that if a volunteer is uncomfortable, maybe standing for long periods of time or lifting heavy items, they feel comfortable, saying, I don't think that's the right role for me. Maybe I can, have a seated position where I'm checking people in. And so for our marathon reception centers, tonight we're having our briefing for that, which is, the marathon is coming up on Monday. So we'll have about 50 volunteers that will tune in or come to the police station or come in over Zoom to be briefed on how that day is going to look and what the various roles are. And many have already reached out and said, I won't really be able to lift anything heavy? Did I hurt my back? Or, it would be great if I could have a chair available to sit. And we're happy to accommodate all of our volunteers to be able to do that. And I have a couple of pictures that I'll just share. This is our volunteers handing out disaster cleanup kits with the Red Cross on the North Shore after some flooding. And then this was back many years ago now. This is probably, oh my gosh, like 15 years ago. Leominster opened up a shelter for ice storms that were happening kind of in the Worcester County area and up to the North Shore. We were completely untouched by it in Brookline. It was, a perfect weather day. And as you drove into Leominster and Lowell area, everything was just a sheet of ice. It was like a winter wonderland. And so they were significantly impacted, and our volunteers went and helped run those shelters. And then certainly during COVID, it took our volunteerism. We really tasked our volunteers to the next level with needs that we had. And so, a lot of our volunteers were high risk, and for many reasons, either existing medical conditions or living with family members that were high risk, or age and whatnot. And so we really tried to find a role for everyone. And so some volunteers worked remotely, making friendly calls to homebound and isolated seniors, assisting with some paperwork needs and organization needs that we had with our volunteer database. Some would come out and assist at like the antibody testing clinics or the early COVID vaccination clinics that we had. They would assist at the food pantry. They helped with the elections because we were having to space out our voters, by social distancing. We had a drive-through graduation that was outdoor that our volunteers came and helped spacing the cars so they could, the graduate would get out of the car and the parents would drive alongside them. It was really quite an operation. And to be honest, our volunteers launched thousands and thousands of hours coming out in support of our community. And so they were really, they had been in existence for, at that point, 16 years already. And that year and a half, we really relied on them an incredible amount. And it was a really great experience. And I think made what was a really tragic time in our country feel really meaningful for people to be able to assist in one way or another. We had some volunteers that were home making masks for us, others that were, making the phone calls, helping us prepare flyers remotely, and then they could send those to us. And then, some were able to come out in person while some were more remote. Here's a picture of our junior certs on the left. I actually met these two young students on the screen here while we were running a flu clinic, a COVID clinic, and they saw our CERT volunteers with the CERT vest, and they said, "What's this CERT program?" And so I told them, and they really were so enthusiastic about the CERT program that working together with these two students and a third student, Sharon, and we started the Junior CERT program. And the picture on the right are our CERT volunteers. In the brown hat is actually my son, and I like to just share that I was pregnant with him during my first ever CERT class in the spring of 2004. And 20 years later, almost 20 years later, he went through the program and became a CERT member. And so it's been, so to say, like in his blood for a long time. And so all three of my boys are current Junior CERT members, and my daughter will go through the training probably next year. And so it's become a real family thing for us. But this is us helping at a PCR testing during COVID. So I guess, why do people keep coming out? They sign up for this training. They get chronic emails from me and asking them to come out and do work. And some of the things that they've told me, right, is that they do it so they can engage with other volunteers and neighbors. Our volunteers want to give back to the community. They want to expand their own personal training and interests. We've had CERT volunteers that have enjoyed the work of emergency management so much, they've gone on to pursue degrees in emergency management and professional positions in emergency management. We have several of our CERT volunteers that are currently working in emergency management at the municipal level. And it's just an area of interest that they may have had that they wanted to expand on. It allows them personally to become more resilient in emergencies, because I always say most of what we'll teach you through these trainings, you'll use first in your own life. and in a local emergency that happens at your dinner table or on a family vacation or at your workplace. And then if you can bring those skills and that training back to the larger community, that's wonderful. But just having people more resilient in their day-to-day lives is important. It allows them to make new friends and new connections. Our CERT volunteers, there's great camaraderie. They sometimes we've activated for shelters that we were expecting to have maybe several dozen displaced residents. And then the fire department ended up being able to open up the building and they could go back in, or they would go stay with family members, or the Red Cross would help, get residents that could not get back into their home into a hotel. And our volunteers, I have a hard time kicking them out because they still want to stay at the shelter and chat and catch up. And so it's really a great experience, I think, for them to just have that connection and push themselves to do new things, right? You may not have ever had an opportunity to assist people who were displaced because of a building fire, or to, be part of something so historic as the first vaccination clinics during COVID. And also just to learn more about your community and the government and local events. And so being able to engage our CERTs in so much that happens in the community, I think really makes them feel like more a part of Brookline. They know more about what's happening because we'll be sending them updates and, we have this event happening in 2 weeks. Would you like to help volunteer and, help do check-in? And they're, I didn't even know we had this. And so it's been a great opportunity, I think, for our volunteers to just kind of have that local connection and learn more. I will say, all of this, having 300 volunteers and having people that will stay in your program and stay active and engaged and come out at 3:00 in the morning when you call them requires a lot of management. And so if you're in a community that, has a CERT program, hopefully you have someone that is leading that program that's really committed, that really values the work of the volunteers, because it's a two-way street. I ask a lot of my volunteers, and in return they often ask a lot of me. And it's important that communities that have these programs really have people involved that are willing to make that kind of personal commitment to the program. And so I think in some of the work I've done with other communities and getting a CERT started, it's about finding the right fit in your community, who is the right person who can engage with the various parts of government, to make sure that the CERT is activated during an emergency, that whoever those emergency responders are I know where we can get some additional help. And whether that's the fire department or the police department or the health department or, emergency management agencies, it's really critical that there's those connections to make sure that it's great to have people recruited and to train them. But if you don't have that connection to your local community, then that's where things start to kind of fall apart. And just in terms of, who is in our CERT, there's a role, as I said, for all volunteers of all abilities, backgrounds, and interests. We have volunteers of all ages, races, religious, cultural backgrounds, sexual orientation, economic status, and abilities. We find work for everyone. We make our trainings accessible to everyone. We try to, even if we provide food at our events, we are aware and sensitive to food allergies and aversions, and really try to make their time volunteering for us meaningful and inclusive. And so that can often be challenging at times, and just with a large group of 300 people. But I think our volunteers would say they feel very much supported. And they continue to come back, and we try to just make sure that it's a meaningful and inclusive experience. And so, they help us also grow and learn and talk about serving a diverse population. A lot of our volunteers have backgrounds working with seniors or disabled people or low income populations. We trained all of our Brookline Housing Authority staff to be CERT members. Our senior housing center communities in Brookline, almost their whole staff went through training. And so these are professionals that really know about their communities, their diverse communities, their communities that might have various abilities and needs, and they can help educate us, when we're working with them. We do during our training a simulation of, a worst case scenario if we had to open up a shelter, and twice that has actually happened in Brookline. We had an public housing, elderly and disabled building that had about 100 residents that suffered a flood. They lost electricity on New Year's night, New Year's Eve, 2 years ago, and were several days sheltering in place without any electricity. And that was an enormous effort by our CERT and Medical Reserve Corps to work with Brookline Housing Authority to make sure that we were checking on our residents to make sure that they, if they had medical needs, they were being met. If we were, if they needed to. We were cleaning out food from refrigerators that had spoiled. We were feeding residents. We were providing, lanterns in their homes, doing daily, multiple times a day checks, apartment to apartment to make sure that they were sheltering in place in a safe way and were having their needs met. A few years prior to that, we had a similar situation in another senior housing building in Brookline where there was a building fire next door and the smoke poured into poured into their building, and we had to evacuate the building, and we brought them to a temporary shelter at a school that was nearby. And there were a lot of lessons learned. One, we learned that the elevator, the getting around that building was probably not the best fit for the population. There was an elevator that was very slow and small, and so getting people in and out of the building was difficult. And there were a lot of pets in that building, and so that led us to realize that we always accept pets. We put them in a shelter in a separate location than where people are sleeping and eating, and then the residents care for their own pets with our assistance. And we also just this past year started the BARC, the Brookline Animal Rescue Crew. So our CERT and MRC volunteers are being trained to work with pets in emergencies, and that's just an additional opportunity for our volunteers. And I think our response to recruitment for that was very high because I think people really like the idea of working with pets in emergencies, and we'll provide them training also that will be most meaningful probably in their own lives on, understanding behavior and body language of animals that might be in crisis. And so a dog that might be typically friendly is exhibiting signs of stress and may become aggressive, and also pet CPR. And so we do like to give our volunteers tools and training that they can use in their own lives. And then, in response to that, they seem very happy and willing to come out and service to our community.
I can't help but marvel how your CERT program is a model for the rest of the other communities. And, just the fact that you're able to help people in Leominster. So you're not just kind of, taking care of your own community, but rather also helping neighboring communities. That's amazing. And also having 300 volunteers, older adults, and then also, was it 75? Yeah. You mentioned sheltering in place and how you gave two examples when you had to kind of, exercise that, particular process for the older population. What can you just kind of walk us through for people who are kind of visual learners? What does that look like, sheltering in place? How do the people in the shelter know that help is coming? How is that what communication happens there? And how quickly does that get implemented? And then what types of personal items are you, the volunteers, are telling the residents to take, including pets?
For kind of the two scenarios, the evacuation and the shelter in place, we've done a lot of work to train our volunteers and to train the community. We have a pretty robust program in Brookline where we have people that go into the community and talk to various groups about the best way to prepare themselves for an emergency. And so having, communication plans, right? It's all about planning, pre-planning. Having a communication plan, having some basic supplies in your home, having some redundancy built in that if you are responsible for certain things that you may not be able to, take care of during an emergency, that someone else can. So, for instance, if you were out and an emergency happened and you needed to shelter in place, say you were at like a house of worship and there was a tornado that came through and you had to shelter in place, and you live 30 minutes away and they're not impacted, that you could call somebody and have them help walk your dog or bring lunch to your elderly parents, and kind of building in that redundancy. Writing down your telephone numbers. I know most of us have a cell phone. We program in a number once, add a name to it, and then we don't commit the number to an emergency. It's really important, ahead of time to have those numbers written down. I think long gone are the days when people had the little address books that they carried with them. And in an emergency, if you didn't have your cell phone or your cell phone service died, you might not be able to call people that you needed to. And I would say, like, during the marathon I was running in 2013 during the bombing, and cell service went down very, very quickly. And I was running and I couldn't reach my husband, who at the time was with my kids, almost line of sight on Beacon Street in Brookline from where I was, to let them know to go home, that I was safe. And I couldn't reach them because the cell service was so jammed. But my mother-in-law, who lived in the Midwest, was able to call me because she pinged a different tower. And so if you have an out-of-state contact or an out-of-region contact for emergencies, that's also important. And you want to make sure you write those numbers down and tuck them in your wallet, put them in your to-go kit, and have that plan in place. You should have also an evacuation point, a place that if you have an emergency in your home, that say you have a fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night, my family knows, we go next door and we're going to all meet on the front steps of my neighbor's house. And that's, my tenants are aware of that. My whole family knows. So in an emergency, we can all gather there and know that everyone is safe. And if something happened and we needed to evacuate, say the greater Boston area, my husband knows where to take my kids, and I know that they'll go there. So even if we can't communicate, that information is already established. And so we're not trying in a crisis to figure out what we're going to do. So having the pre-planning is really important. Having some supplies in your home or in a bag that you could take with you if you needed to evacuate is also important. Medication, I know, is tough because that's something that people are always worried about, but you should have a to-go kit that has maybe your basic medications, and then every month or two you have to cycle those out and then put in the fresher medication so they don't expire. You should have some non-perishable food that you can have access to, some water, change of clothes, maybe a toothbrush would be really nice for the people that you're going to be sharing your space with. Some critical documents. I personally take a photo of everything, scan things, and I send them up to the cloud. I've also sent them over email to, my family in the Midwest, so that if my house was on fire, or like Katrina, where we saw not only were homes and neighborhoods washed out, but the government buildings that house those records were washed away. It's really important that you have those documents somewhere. And so, we do a lot of training with our volunteers to prepare themselves, and then also to kind of proselytize into the community about emergency preparedness, to do things like that before an emergency. We all see that when we get the weather report that, a blizzard's coming, everyone runs to the grocery store and we're, stocking up on milk and, bread and whatnot. For senior populations, that can be harder to do. And so, what we like to have people thinking about is, when you go to the store and you see something that, is a non-perishable that you enjoy, that's on sale. Instead of buying the one can of a vegetable, buy two and keep that and rotate that through your pantry. So you have, more than just a 1 week supply in case, the blizzard happens the day before you're scheduled to get more food in the house. And so just thinking about that and not going out and spending a huge amount of money on backup supplies and kits. But when something goes on sale, just, thinking about, okay, I'm going to add that to my pantry. I have a to-go kit. I'm going to put in an extra set of, glasses or contacts, and, maybe some, a change of clothes, and, some personal items, and maybe some first aid kits. And, you can really build up some supplies to have, so that if you needed to leave your house quickly, or if you needed to stay there for a period of time, you already have that, kind of taken care of. And so we do training for that through the CERT and the MRC. And then we do reminders and, continuously through, every year for our volunteers, because if they want to come out and assist the community, they need to know that their own families are taken care of. And so it's important that emergency preparedness starts at home, so that they can come out and help us.
I can see the value in not only re-educating or, offering refresher type information to the members, but do you also offer educational programs for the community, so that way they know exactly what to do in case of an emergency? So that way it just makes the CERT volunteer efforts that much easier. Do you do that?
Yeah, we do a lot of education in the community, both the Office of Emergency Management, the Office of Emergency Management, the Health Department, and the Police Department have series of trainings that we do that help address, emergencies as they're evolving, and it's a changing curriculum. So, we did a whole series of training about like COVID and what type of emergency, preparedness people might need to know during COVID times, I and two other officers at the police department do the active shooter, active threat training in Brookline. And we have a pretty robust program where we've trained all of our houses of worship, community organizations, our schools, our municipal governments, and different community groups, senior housing, on how to respond if they find themselves in an incident where there's an active threat. And so the police department does that training fairly regularly in the community. Those, unfortunately, have been very well attended just because of what we're seeing. I think there were 600 active shooter events in the United States last year alone, and unfortunately, that's a curriculum that we keep on training. The more resilient and trained our community is, the better prepared our community will be. So if people have some awareness and have done some pre-planning and kind of thinking about how they'll respond in an emergency, it just makes our job as emergency responders that much easier. We also have CERT members that have gone through advanced training to help us with training our community and being part of that. And so it doesn't just rest on the shoulders of, municipal staff, whether that be, the police department, Office of Emergency Management, or the health department, who are kind of the three main institutions, at least here in Brookline, that do community education. We also can rely on our volunteers to come out and help do that. And so we have programs with, our senior housing and our public housing. Right now, we just did working with pets in emergencies, how to prepare for an emergency that might involve your pet, what supplies you might need, understanding, that we will take pets in a shelter, and how to expect, what to expect from us. And then also just making sure that the pets are vaccinated and registered, and, kind of all of that. And so that was a joint effort between the police department and Office of Emergency Management and the health department. So there seems to be a lot of interest. And I think, just seeing, you watch the news, the 24/7 news cycle, and you see there's a lot of emergencies that are happening, day in and day out. And I think it piques people's interest to say, I really want to be prepared if something happens. In Brookline, we host 2 rounds of training each year. So in the Brookline program, we do active recruitment through our social media and our news outlets, and advertise that we're hosting a training. And then our volunteers will submit an application, give us some background information on them. They're all CORI and SORI checked to make sure that we have appropriate volunteers, to be working with members of our community that might be in crisis. And then we will have the 10-week training program. We ask our volunteers to go through, at least 70% of those classes, just because they lose too much of the initial training. I think it's hard for them to kind of pick up on kind of what the tasks are that they may be asked to do at an activation. We do not just limit our Brookline program to Brookline residents, although we like there to be some connection. Either you live fairly close, you work in Brookline, you live in Brookline, you have some tie to Brookline. We have a lot of folks on the Boston border and the Newton, and that live in Newton, that have joined, as well as, outside of the community. I actually did a training a few years ago down on the South Shore in Quincy for a kind of a regional training, and we hosted that over the course of 4 or 5 weekend days. If you are interested in your own program and in the community that you live in, you can go to, if you just Google like Community Emergency Response Team. Okay. FEMA does have a website that lists all the CERT programs in the country that are registered, and then you can see what the closest CERT program would be to where you live. And if you don't have a CERT program and you're interested in starting one, I would, kind of recommend doing some research in terms of your municipal government and who is doing that work currently, because there's probably someone that is handling preparations for cold weather and warm weather emergencies, or who is kind of in charge of the COVID response, and who's doing that type of work. If they're an Office of Emergency Management, is there an emergency preparedness coordinator in the police department? Is it the health department? The Medical Reserve Corps is kind of the sister organization to CERTs, and in a lot of communities, those programs are joined. So if there's a Medical Reserve Corps, that the coordinator of that program might be someone to reach out to and say, hey, have you thought about initiating, a community emergency response team? The CERT program, really has become kind of a family program in our community. And I think, for anyone out there that's interested in joining or starting one, just knowing that there needs to be a good investment from the municipality in doing the work. the training, bringing in diversity of trainers, diversity of topics, and making the training meaningful for the volunteers, and allowing the volunteers to be kind of part of the process. So we had started with the basic CERT curriculum, which was, established by the LA Fire Department in the mid 80s, and clearly, emergency response has evolved considerably in the last 40 years. And so there's been a lot of changes to kind of what we're seeing as potential risks in the communities, and training our volunteers and staying on top of that. And so the volunteers have said, well, I really would like some training in this area. And then, we will go out and we'll source a curriculum and a trainer for that. We had a lot of interest in working with pets in emergencies. So that's why we engaged with our local animal control officer to initiate the Brookline Animal Rescue Crew, the BARC. And so, it's evolving with our current times, and staying with it. It's funny, as the coordinator of the program, I was originally doing emergency preparedness work, and when I was a patrolman, and now I'm a detective lieutenant assigned to the courts. And so it's really not related to the work I do, but I feel very passionate about the program. And thankfully, my chief has been very supportive of my work with the CERT and allowed me to keep the program when I moved on to a new assignment. In the course of the 20 years, I've made a lot of really great friends on my program, and people that have come to my house for holidays and my annual Porch Fest. And, I talk to probably anywhere from, 10 to 12 volunteers in any given week that might have questions about, something that they read, that's happening in town, or, they don't know who to contact about, recycling bins. And so, you have to have someone that's willing to kind of serve as like an ambassador to the municipal government to answer questions and direct people correctly. And again, it's about investment, that our volunteers give us a lot of time and a lot of energy. And we want to make sure that we're making that, giving back to them as well. So I think that's been part of our success in running the program for 20 years, is having these great relationships with our volunteers. Also, if people are interested in emergency preparedness and your own community or your nearby community doesn't have a program that you can get involved in, the FEMA website and has a lot of online training. And actually, there's a whole CERT curriculum that you can review online. If you just Google Community Emergency Response Team, I could probably Google it and put it in the chat. But there's a lot of training. So one of our CERT volunteers right now, who's been a long time volunteer, he's been with the program almost since its inception, and is one of our reception center captains. He's actually going through the training himself to become a CERT coordinator. And so he wanted to get more involved. He does so much for us already. I'm really grateful. He wants to be more involved so that he can help co-teach these programs. And then we'll bring him into the community. And, he can talk about his experience as a volunteer, because, people can hear from me saying, oh, the program's great and you're going to love it. But I think it's more important to hear that from other volunteers who are actually giving up their time and their energy and time away from their families to be able to come out with us.
Can you explain a little bit more about the junior program?
Sure. Yeah. So through the Brookline High School, maybe about 6 years ago, they started a Medical Reserve Corps club. And so there were students that were interested in public health, and they have like a club manager, which is a teacher at the school. And they were volunteering at one of the flu clinics, because our flu clinics in Brookline are coordinated by the Medical Reserve. The Health Department and the Medical Reserve Corps is the kind of lead agency on that. And so I had met these juniors in high school at that club, and they were interested in the CERT program because they saw our volunteers were there helping check people in and helping direct people, to the various open stations to get their shot. And, I was telling them about the program, and there had been kind of, for most of my time as a CERT coordinator, it was one of my goals and kind of a dream of mine to have a junior program where we could, either CERT with an S, Student Emergency Response Team, or Junior CERT, where we would train youth in emergency preparedness. And I had, and I thought with my own kids, maybe one of them would really want to do it, and they weren't really interested when they got to high school. But then I met these young gentlemen who were MRC club members who loved the idea of the Junior CERT training, being a Junior CERT member. And we met over the course of several times, and also with their coordinator at the high school, and put together, there's already kind of a framework of training, and then taking the training that we do on our more like kind of adult traditional CERT, we tailored that towards the youth, and we did the training. And so they've been really great. I think, again, there's a role for everyone. And so a lot of our volunteers, there's a lot of heavy work at, an emergency response. Like we have these trailers that are filled with cots and blankets. And, if we have to open up a reception center or a shelter, there's a lot of movement of this equipment that needs to happen. And having these young people is really great because they like just come in and they're ready to move and so full of energy. It's actually been really helpful for us. We also support a lot of community events. We have tables and chairs and like big pop-up tents. And so, during community events, especially if there's going to be, high heat and sun, we'll help support those events by bringing out the equipment. Like the Brookline Rotary has a dog day event every year, and we support that by bringing tents and whatnot. And now we have this great pool of volunteers that are really happy to do it. Most of our volunteers, regardless of age, are really happy to get in there and roll their sleeves up and do the work. But it is nice sometimes to have these younger folks. And so there are some deployments that we would not call them for. I would not call our junior certs to come out at 2 a.m, to help, set up a shelter, but it would certainly be something that, we would utilize them on a more long-term basis. And community events, I think people really like to come by, during like our big town festival, and we have a CERT tent, and they see these young people who are talking about emergency preparedness, and they're working with our older CERT volunteers. And it's so wonderful to see these groups kind of working together. And I think it's just really meaningful for both. And so the CERTs, junior CERTs joining our program has been really wonderful. And we're just doing our 3rd class now. We just had 24 high schoolers that signed up, and my first middle schooler. I have an 8th grader as well who joined. And so it's really great, and they're really enthusiastic. And for our junior certs, it allows them to have just something additional on their college application. It shows that they've taken the next step to get involved in their community, to get back to their community. They get certified in CPR, AED, first aid. They learn the curriculum for Narcan and Stop the Bleed. They'll go through the Red Cross training for mass care and shelter operations. So they really have a lot that they can put on their college application. Or, a resume if they're not going to college and they're looking for a job, that show that they have, participated in kind of advanced training. And I think it's, it's really just wonderful for them to have as they go off into the world as young adults as well. Some awareness, situational awareness. We talk a lot about that. Some basic emergency preparedness, some basic supplies. All of our CERT graduates, we have a big graduation ceremony at the end of our training for both the junior CERTs and our 10-week adult program. We give, they get a baseball cap that says CERT. I'm actually wearing my CERT green today for anyone that knows the CERT program. This is the color. They get a backpack that has supplies. They get a penny that, identifies them as a CERT volunteer. And, so they have some basic first aid kind of first emergency response equipment that they can kind of launch with. And, I know some have told me they brought, to college with them, and they've, updated it with, some things that they think they might need. And I was recently at one of my volunteers' houses. I went to drop something off, and I was so thrilled to come in. And in her entry mudroom, her and her husband are both volunteers, and they had their 2 backpacks sitting up right on the shelf by their door. So if they had to run out the door, they had it. And I was just so thrilled to see that.
Wow. That's amazing. I can imagine like groups like the ROTC might want to participate in something like that, or even Boy Scouts. My youngest, I have 3 boys. You mentioned you have 3 boys. And so my youngest is an Eagle Scout. He's in college now, but he's still a part of Boy Scouts, but more the crew, which is the older version. I can imagine them really wanting to, get this type of training. So for communities who have a really robust group of young adults who really want to have more life skill trainings or situational awareness training, how can they have people like you come in and train them?
Right. So we talked about that a little bit, that if you're in a community, and I'll tell you, so I have some Eagle Scouts that are going through my training, and I know they have so much emergency preparedness training through their many years of involvement with the Scouts. It's really wonderful. And to be able to add to that maybe they could start a junior CERT program, so if you have high schoolers, they have clubs, they can approach, most high school clubs. I think you only need to have like 10 people that sign up that want to do it with you. And You get like a sponsor, which is usually a teacher or an administrator in the school to kind of supervise. And then I would reach out to, we were talking about a few minutes ago, Daniel and I said, if you wanted to start a program, like see who's doing the emergency preparedness work in your community. Our police department has an emergency preparedness coordinator, which was the position I formerly held. And so that would be the point of contact. Or is there a medical reserve corps coordinator at the health department? Is there an office of emergency management? Does the fire department do any training for, they get a lot of programs where they'll go into the schools and train students. And so I'm utilizing people throughout the town that do this training in their own agencies and pulling it together with the eye on emergency response for CERT members, for volunteers. And so, it hasn't been really like we need to recreate the wheel. The work is being done in the community. It's just a matter of navigating that by finding out who's currently doing the work and has the pulse on that. I mean, most communities are, they're mandated to have a local emergency preparedness planning council. So someone's running that. Someone's dealing with high heat emergencies and cold emergencies. Someone is dealing with the COVID response. So there's people in communities that are doing the work. So it's kind of navigating that municipal government system to see who the best point of contact would be. And in some situations, some communities have told me, oh, I reached out, I was working with this person, and then, they retired or they got promoted and they no longer do the work, and things kind of fell apart. And it's, just trying to find the right fit. And so starting, maybe by contacting like your town hall, your city hall, and finding out who's doing emergency preparedness, and then, working with that person to help you get a training started. And, when I was first recruiting for instructors, I would ask the fire department to come do a class for CERT, and they were like, oh, what do you want me to say? And I'll say, well, you do community education already. This is nothing new, but just now put an eye on it for the volunteers who will be supporting you during a fire activation. If there's a fire and we have displaced residents, they love that the fire department doesn't have to really engage and worry about the residents, because we have volunteers that are doing that. They can fight the fire, right? They can do the work that they're trained to do, and we can have these volunteers come in. And so you can kind of sell it to people to say, oh, wow, that is really kind of awesome, because now, that was one component of emergency response that was taxing, and now we can utilize these volunteers for that. And similarly, in the police department, we have people that are doing education and areas of situational awareness and active threats, and having that, as well as we use our department CPR instructor to do our trainings. And so they're doing the work, and then I just ask them, like, contextualize it for volunteers, make it digestible for them, and how they might utilize the skills we're giving them during an activation, during a shelter, during an emergency where they're called out. And and it's been pretty successful.
Now, does it require budgeting? I mean, where does the money come from? Because you're using experts' time, then you have some sort of a pseudo uniform, and it's not a one and done type training. You don't learn everything in 1 hour. So it's a repetitive, almost like a weekly training. And how long is that training for?
Right.
Again, this is for the juniors.
So this is where there does need to be a commitment by the municipal government or city government to support it. And I think, coming off of COVID right now, I think most communities see the investment as worthwhile. MEMA, the Mass Emergency Management Agency, does annual grants to support the CERT program, the Citizen Corps programs. And so right now there's actually it's on my desk. I have my grant application that I'll be filling out soon. And this will, I can apply for up to $5,000, and it can help support management of the program. So, paying to have, if I need an instructor to come in, like a fire safety professional to come in, or one of my officers to come in, it can help support bringing them in. Also, it allows me to buy equipment. In Brookline, we are part of the Urban Area Security Initiative, which are the 11 or so cities and towns in the greater Boston area: Quincy, Cambridge, Boston. I believe it's Everett. There's like 11 communities that are part of the Urban Area Security Initiative. And so we've been able to get a tremendous amount of funding since 9/11 through that program to support our local needs. So if you live in the greater Boston area and you're part of that UASI or one of the secondary UASI agencies, you might be able to tap into some funding specifically for community education, community resiliency planning. And then also through MEMA, they have funds to support. And a lot of the CERT curriculum is available online. I will say, if anyone out there is interested in starting a CERT program, I am happy to share all of my materials. We have, PowerPoints that we've, fine-tuned over the last 20 years on a variety of topics. I'm happy to share those. And we've actually gone out to a lot of other communities in the region and done education. I was saying we did a whole program down in Quincy, which was a regional CERT training because there was not a program there. And so myself and another officer at the police department here, that was my co-coordinator, and then some folks, I think from Cambridge Public Health, did some training on the South Shore. We've assisted with Needham and some other, kind of Metro West communities on how to start up a CERT program and do some training. And so, I am happy to come help communities and get this program started because I've seen just like the great benefits that we've had in Brookline. And then going to the CERT website online, you can download the materials, you can download the trainings. You don't need to print them out. You can order them, but everything is, great now electronically, and you can send those out to volunteers. They can do trainings kind of independently. A lot of my volunteers are doing like the NIMS and ICS trainings independent. We send them the links and we ask that they go through certain trainings and then, more advanced trainings on areas that they might be interested in. All of our animal rescue trainings, most of them have curriculums online that we can share with people so volunteers can do that, when it's convenient for them, and then just report back to us so we can record what their training levels are. But it does require some commitment from your municipality. And so I've been very lucky to have a police chief that is very supportive of the program. And, so we have these high school kids that are coming in on Sundays from 10 to 2. And, which was shocking to me. I could get 25 kids to get out of bed early on a Sunday to come in and do this training. But we like to provide them some pizza midday, kind of keep their bellies full. And so, we'll provide some food and we'll provide them some supplies at the end. And so there's, a bit of a cost for that, but it's a good investment.
Yeah, definitely a very good investment in the future because, as you're training the younger adults, they're going to be, they are our future. So we need them. And, it just helps them. We talk about, a lot of younger adults are spending too much time on the internet. So it's just a nice way to kind of really look up and look around to see what else they could do besides being in social media. So it's really a wonderful thing. So we're at the top of the hour, and thank you so much for continuing with the program. I lost a little bit of connection there, but I am so impressed. I really am. And I can't wait for other people out in the community to reach out to you. I mean, so how can people reach out to you? And also, what's the one thing that you want people to take away from this talk?
I'd be happy to have anyone email me that's looking for more information on the program. We can set up a Zoom and talk about how to get started. I can, assist them in kind of doing some research on their local community to see where might be a good starting place for them and have conversations, with those folks. I think the takeaway is, I can talk forever about what a great asset our CERT program and our Medical Reserve Corps have been to the town of Brookline and assisting our residents during times of need. But I do think, based on the feedback that I get from my volunteers and what I see, is that they're getting as much from being part of the program as we are. And so it's really just kind of a beautiful way to engage with your community and do something really meaningful and feel a part of something, especially in a time when I think so many people are isolated. There's, people coming out of COVID that were isolated for long periods of time. Everything is electronic. Nobody talks on the phone anymore, right? You just send text messages, but really having that engagement and coming out and being part of something is, I know for me, it's been the highlight probably of my 26-year career as a police officer to date has been the work with the CERT program. And I know I have a lot of volunteers that tell me that, I lived in this community for a long time, but I never felt like I was part of it until I did this work. And so I think if you have some time to give and you have some interest in the topic, I think it's really worth looking into.
I love it. I love it. It just reminds me of that quote from Mr. Rogers, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be quoting it verbatim, but it has to do with, him when he was younger, being afraid, and he turned to his mom and, because something happened, and she said to him, just always look for the helpers. Yeah. Always look for the helpers. And that's what it is. That's what CERT is and MRC. And I had somebody come on a few shows ago to talk about MRC, but really everybody look into these programs and see how you can be a part of something amazing. So giving back and being a part of something big and wonderful is amazing. So with that said, I want to thank you, Lieutenant Casey Hatchett. And also I want to thank the Quincy Health Department for continuing to sponsor Aging Strong.